and welcome to English for You. I'm Erin.
And I'm Laura.
And we are talking about a very serious subject today.
Yes, we are.
Now, we all know that nuclear power is a pretty controversial subject.
That's right. So there are some pros and cons, right?
That's right. So let's go over the pros and cons of nuclear power. So one pro, or one good thing, is that the nuclear power reactors where the power is made, they don't contribute to climate change.
Oh, that's true. However, I am going to give you another con, which is the negative of the bad side of nuclear power, which is transporting nuclear fuel is very risky.
That's right.
We all know that.
Yes, nuclear fuel can make people very sick.
I know.
Okay, well, here's another pro.
Okay.
Nuclear power plants that work properly release less radioactivity, that's the dangerous stuff that makes us sick, than a coal plant.
Wow, is that so? Okay. However, I'm going to actually give another con. We're still struggling with how to deal with nuclear waste.
That's right. So when we're done with it, we don't know what to do with it yet.
Yay.
All right, here's another pro. Nuclear power requires a lot less fuel to provide power. So we get more from less, more power from less stuff.
I didn't know that there are so many pros out there. Okay, I'm going to give another final con, which is old nuclear power plants aren't built as well as modern ones, and they can all be affected by natural disasters such as tsunamis.
That's right. We'll actually talk about that later. But as you can see, there are good things and bad things to nuclear power. So we should be doing our research about nuclear power before we make any major decisions about it.
That's true. And that's why it's so controversial.
Exactly. All right. Well, let's continue on in our article to find out a bad thing that has happened from nuclear power in the past. But don't forget, there are still good things as well. All right? So keep an open mind. Let's get started.
Reading.
The Chernobyl disaster, then and now. Disaster struck the Chernobyl nuclear power plant in Ukraine, USSR, shortly after midnight on April 26, 1986. During a safety test, there was a power surge. Workers reacted by trying to shut the plant down, but another surge caused several explosions and a fire. Worst of all, large amounts of radioactive material were released into the air. Later, the disaster was blamed on poor plant design and a lack of proper safety training. No one was told how serious things were at first. People living in nearby Pripyat went about their business as normal until a few fell violently ill. What's worse, officials were slow to get people out of the danger zone. For instance, it wasn't until 2 p.m. the following day that buses started taking people away. The lasting effects of Chernobyl were terrible. 28 people died of radiation poisoning within a few weeks. Many more in Ukraine and nearby countries developed cancer as the radiation spread. Much of Europe was affected. It's still impossible to estimate how many people might die as a result of Chernobyl. Some put the figure at around 4,000. Others fear the true number will be much higher.
All right, so let's get started on our article. We are going to start by telling you about something that happened a few years ago now, 1986. I was just a small child when this happened. So it says, disaster struck the Chernobyl nuclear power plant in Ukraine, USSR, shortly after midnight on April 26, 1986.
That's right. 其实谈到有关这个核电厂存废议题的时候，是不是很难不提到这个车诺比事件，就是 the Chernobyl disaster。在这个能源危机不断逼近的现代社会，我们应该要更加了解有关这个事件的始末哦。OK， 好，是非常重要的。来，我们来看一下，一开始文章就提到1986年4月26日的凌晨，然后我好像有 Google 一下，大概1点23分哦。这个苏联的乌克兰 OK 内的车诺比核电厂的这个第4号反应炉发生爆炸了。那我再小补充一点哦，因为这个事故是历史上最严重的核电事故，也是首例被国际核事件这个分级表这个评为最高的第7级事件的特大事故。So it was so serious。那我们刚刚提到的车诺比就是 Chernobyl， 那 Ukraine 就是乌克兰 ，USSR 就是苏联，大家认识一下这些单词，因为都是非常关键的。
Right. Now, even if you weren't alive at the time of this disaster, you probably still know about it because it's actually still affecting people today. But let's find out what happens. It says, during a safety test, there was a power surge.
好，我们就来追溯一下，看看发生什么事情哦。这个其实主因呢，好像是这个反应炉进行这个供电的测试的时候，功率急剧增加，然后破坏这个反应炉。其中的 surge。OK， 这个名词通常我们在讲到电的时候呢，提到就是浪涌，就是瞬间它会出现超出稳定值的这个峰值，所以 power surge 我们可以把它就是想成它是电源爆冲这样子的一个意思哦。
So just too much power at one time,
that's
basically.
right.
All right, well, what happened? It says workers reacted by trying to shut the plant down. But another surge caused several explosions and a fire. Now, we use the verb react in that sentence. Now, when you react to something, you behave or act in a certain way because of something that happened earlier. For example, if a robber walks into a bank and shouts, "I have a gun!" then people are going to start screaming, running, maybe falling on the floor. They see a situation happen and then they act based on that situation. They react to this situation. Here's an example. The workers reacted to the news that they wouldn't be paid on time by shouting at the boss.
Oh, I would too. OK， 好啦，那回到课文提到，就是虽然工作人员试着要把这个核电厂关闭，但是另一波的这个浪涌呢，还是造成了数个爆炸，而且连续的爆炸还引发了大火。所以，首先我们先来看一下 react 这个动词，就是反应。Okay, so for example, when I told her what happened, she reacted with anger. So it must be something really serious, okay? Or sometimes we might say, oh, I didn't expect him to react that way. Okay, react by doing something 是一个很常见的一个片语哦，就是以什么的方式回应。而 react to something 就是对什么东西反应，像是 she reacted to the news by getting angry, or react with 是什么呢？就是与什么有化学反应哦。For example, when calcium reacts with water, they explode. 就是钙跟水产生化学反应时会 explode 爆炸 ，like what it happened here.
Right. Okay. So a lot of ways we can use that word.
Right.
Let's move on to the next one. We found out that the workers tried to shut the power plant down.
Right.
Now, when you shut something down, you turn it off or make it stop working completely. For example, make sure you shut down your computer before you leave the office.
That's right. Shut something down 就是使什么东西停止运转，或者是使什么东西关闭。比方像是呢，the computer suddenly shut down. It turned off.
Hopefully you saved your work.
I know I was going to say that. Okay, and we also saw the word explosion.
That's right. So an explosion is a big burst of light and energy that happens when something gets too hot or is set on fire.
Right.
Now there are fun explosions like the ones you see from firecrackers and fireworks, but explosions are often dangerous and do a lot of damage, such as when a bomb goes off. Here's an example. Move away from that burning car. The fire might cause an explosion.
Yeah, we see that a lot in movies.
That's
okay. Right. Explosion 就是爆炸 OK 它是个名词刚刚我提到的 explode 是它的动词所以像是火山爆发就是 volcanic explosions 那刚刚我提到炸弹 OK 爆破就是 bomb explosions 那当然还有瓦斯爆炸啦gas explosions 还有 nuclear explosion OK 就是核子哦 OK so let's continue reading
All right, so we have already read something bad.
Yeah.
We're going to see something even worse here. It
no.
says, worst of all, large amounts of radioactive material were released into the air. Now, of course, we started that sentence with the phrase, worst of all. Now, we use this phrase when we're giving a lot of bad information, but now we want to introduce the worst piece of bad information out of everything. Here's an example. So many things went wrong today. Worst of all, they all happened on my birthday.
Oh, not a happy birthday anymore. Okay, worst of all 就是要强调最糟糕的事，好像已经很多不好事情，但是最惨的还有什么什么？那最糟糕是什么呢？大量的放射性的物质被释放到空气环境中待会就来探讨到这样会怎么办呢？那我们先来造一个例句 ，worst of all. For example, I forgot my backpack.Was late for class, and worst of all, I studied the wrong material for the test. How terrible can it be?
All right, well, let's find out what is worst of all in this situation.
Okay.
We talked about the adjective radioactive.
Okay, radioactive. 先来解释一下，这个形容词就是放射性的 radioactive. Wastes, maybe
radioactive materials, radioactive fuel. So it's an adjective and it's used to talk about things that have nuclear energy, right? All right, so we said that these radioactive material was released into the air. Now here, the verb release means that a chemical, gas, or liquid is let out of a container or is flowing freely when it was kept somewhere before. Now, before, the radiation was kept inside the nuclear reactor, but the explosion allowed the radiation to flow freely. Here's another example. When you turn this tap, you'll release the water from the tank.
OK. Release, OK, 刚提到的指的是化学物质的释放，所以它是一个动词。像是呢 ，plastic releases dangerous chemicals when it burns. OK. Or, for example, I could also say during exercise, the body releases chemicals in the brain that make you feel better. So we all have to do more exercise. I know.
Yeah. All right, so we are going to continue on in the article. It says here, later, the disaster was blamed on poor plant design and a lack of proper safety training. All right, so we saw the verb blame.
Yes.
Now, when you blame something on somebody or something, you think or say that they are responsible for something very bad happening. Now, when you blame somebody, you say that something is somebody else's fault.
It's your fault.
Here's an example. Don't blame me for being late to school. You were the one who couldn't decide what to wear.
Okay, so true. I do that a lot. Okay, late for school because I couldn't decide what to wear. Blame 是责备、指责，它是一个动词哦。OK， 所以通常可以说，可能就是你的错 ，OK？ 所以呢，这个课文是在说什么呢？他说有个说法呢，是把罪呢怪在怎么样？设计缺陷以及操作人员的训练不足。I wonder if that's true. They blamed it on the people for the safety test, right?
There were two things that they blamed it on, and one was the lack of safety training. We'll find out about that. The other was poor plant design. That just means that this was a really old building.
Okay.
It wasn't designed very well.
Okay.
And that contributes to
that could be it.
Yeah, it makes a big problem. So, like we said earlier, the modern plants are a lot better. The older ones, not so great. But of course, there was a lack of safety training. Now, when you have a lack of something, you don't have enough of something that you need, or you don't have any of the thing that you need. Now, here, they needed to have more training for a bad problem like this, but they didn't get that training. So here's an example. There's a lack of interest in this class, so the school stopped running it.
哇哦！所以刚刚课文是提到他们是缺乏训练，对不对？专业的那种这个安全的训练。所以 lack of something 就是缺乏什么什么。For example, a lack of experience, or sometimes you might have this problem, lack of sleep. I need that to sleep well.
Okay, well. So we found out what the problems were. We found out who got blamed. Now let's find out what happened in the city, Chernobyl. It says, no one was told how serious things were at first.
That sounds really bad.
It is really
所以
bad.
一开始并没有人被告知事情有多严重，可是这么大的灾害发生哎 ，What are the people gonna do?
Well,
They'll
it
get
says
sick.
people living in nearby Pripyat went about their business as normal until a few fell violently ill. Now, in that sentence, we saw our pocket phrase go today. That's go about one's business. So let's take a quick break to find out more about it.
Pocket phrase go!
Hello， 你们好。别看小青椒，我现在好像很正常的在跟你们说话，我心里真的是快要急死了，你们知道吗？昨晚啊，明明就遭受到了攻击，整个公司一团乱。Tony 怎么还是可以这样，好像什么事都没有发生一样，悠哉的做他的事呢 ？In spite of the horrible attack last night, Tony could still go about his business. In spite of the horrible attack last night, Tony could still go about his business. 啊，是说他的心脏很大颗吗？还是说他有什么计划了？他可不可以跟我说啊？我一个人在这边真的是不知道该如何是好哎，真的是很佩服他可以这么的冷静，像平常的一样在工作。没错，同学们有猜到刚刚说到的片语 "go about one's business" 是什么意思了吗？我们首先知道 business 这个名词本身就有事情啊、事物的意思。当我说 someone goes about his or her business， 就是在说他在做他平常在做的事情，也就是呢他的日常作息嘛。Unlike me, Tony could go about his business no matter what happens. Unlike me.Tony could go about his business no matter what happens. 哎呀，不像我，你知道吗 ？Tony 好像不管发生任何事情都能够正常的作息耶。哎呀，还有啊，其实啊，不瞒你们说，小青椒我不是很喜欢大家一直关注我，所以啊，拜托你们不要再看我好吗？继续做你们的事情吧。Don't pay attention to me. Just go about your business, OK？ 你还看？
哇哦！所以我们都学到 go about one's business 就是正常作息 ，OK？ 那我们刚刚课文还有提到 violently 这个副词，就是极度的如何，像是 violently ill 就是极度的不舒服。因为回到课文，他提到就是这个爆炸发生之后呢，其实呢这里小补充一下，它并没有引起苏联官方的重视，但这样还是因为这样子没有引起重视呢，所以呢人们呢其实都没有被告知事情的全部真相，所以课文才会说啦，居住在 Pripyat 的这个居民们都照平常的生活着啊，直到他们开始觉得极度的不舒服。Is somebody going to do anything about this?
Well,
like somebody going to tell them?
They did eventually, yes, but they didn't do it very soon enough.
Right.
It says, what's worse, officials were slow to get people out of the danger zone.
Oh, no.
Okay, so we used another phrase there, what's worse. That's
Right.
like saying worst of all, just more bad information here. But we also use the word zone and danger zone. So a zone is an area that is different from the other areas around it in some way. So for example, a danger zone is an area where you are going to experience a large amount of danger, but the areas around it will be safe.
Okay, so danger zone 是什么呢？就是危险地带或是区域。OK， 所以再小补充一下，就是莫斯科的这个核专家和苏联领导人得到的讯息，竟然只是这个反应炉发生火灾，但并没有爆炸。所以我们可以看得到，这个课文也有提到，就是苏联的政府官方他们反应是非常的迟缓的，所以 that's I hope that's the worst of all.
Well, not really.
We're going to find out more terrible
Yeah.
things.
It says here, for instance, it wasn't until 2 p.m. the following day that buses started taking people away. So
Okay.
it happened just after midnight,
Right.
not until 2 p.m. the next day. So that's 14 hours in between, 14 hours of radioactive material going out.
刚刚句子当中，我们用到这样的一个文法重点 ，It was not until that 后面这个子句，这样的句型是用来强调句中的时间副词，表示直到什么时候才怎么样。其实呢，它也可以写成 For instance, the buses didn't start taking people away until 2 p.m. the following day. 但是呢，有没有注意课文的句型是更加强调时间哦？它是这样子的写到 It wasn't until 2 p.m. the following day that buses started taking people away. 就是用来强调，直到隔天的下午2点这样子的一个情况呢，才有公车把人们带离开。
All right, now because of this, it says here the lasting effects of Chernobyl were terrible.
Indeed, OK，、所以车诺比事件因为这样子呢，造成很可怕的效应。Lasting, OK， 是现在分词当形容词，表示持久的、耐久的。所以呢，我们来有一个小补充，当时在现场附近的这个村庄测出了这个致命量数百倍的核放射线 ，OK， 而且呢，这个放射线值还不断的在升高，因此呢，绝大部分的受害者的病因跟死因其实都是归咎于事故中释放的高能放射线。A lot of people got sick because of that.
That's right. And of course, it says here 28 people died of radiation poisoning within a few weeks. So that's just the immediate effects here, right? So they died of poisoning. Now, we use the phrase die of something to say what caused a person to die. Now, die of will always be followed by the cause of death. So they died of cancer, they died of radiation poisoning, like that. Here's an example. Sarah's grandmother died of cancer. She was very sick for a long time.
OK， 在几个星期之后呢，我们课文看到28人死于放射线中毒。Die of， 通常我们知道死于什么样的疾病，甚至于是意外都可以，像是 die of old age， 因为老年而死亡。But sometimes in speaking, we might say I almost died of embarrassment. To mean I was extremely embarrassed.
All right, so we also talked about the adjective or radioactive earlier, but let's find out what causes things to become radioactive. That's radiation.
没错 ，radiation 也要学一下。这个呢是一个名词，就是辐射或是辐射能，还有放射线、放射物的意思哦。
That's right. Okay, so we said radiation poisoning. Now, poisoning is a noun, and this is an illness that's caused by poison or a chemical or a liquid that can cause you to get very sick. So, radiation is a chemical that will make you very sick, so it will poison you. Here's another example. Many of the people of Flint, Michigan, US have lead poisoning because of the bad water pipes in their city.
OK, poisoning 就是中毒，它是个名词，像是 food poisoning. I had that last weekend， 就是食物中毒。那刚刚提到的 lead poisoning 就是铅中毒啦。
All right, so here's what happened as a result. This is more of a long-term effect. So 28 people died right away. Here it says many more in Ukraine and nearby countries developed cancer as the radiation spread.
天啊，还有更多人在乌克兰和附近邻近的国家，都因为事故中释放的高能放射线，导致了 cancer， 也就是癌症。
And of course, much of Europe was affected.
而且欧洲很多地方也是这样子。
All right, let's continue on. It says it's still impossible to estimate how many people might die as a result of Chernobyl. Now, of course, by estimate this verb, when you estimate a number, you try to guess or judge what the number will be because you don't have enough information to say what it is. Here's an example. John estimated the number of people at the concert to be around 2,000.
Wow， 所以其实现今我们还是很难估计到底有多少人可能因为车诺比事件而死亡。估计的英文就是 estimate， 它是一个动词。Okay, for example, we need to estimate how much paint we'll need for the job. You don't want to get too much or less.
Yeah.
Right, okay, so let's continue reading to find out more about what happened.
It says some put the figure at around 4,000.
Wow.
Now, figure here is just another word for number. And others fear the true number will be much higher.
OK， 不过大部分我们还是更担心，就是说其实可能数据比我们想象中还多更多。
Yeah, no one really
sad.
knows. Yeah.
Okay.
But we have come to the end of today's article. We are going to finish off today with For You Chat.
For You Chat.
All right, today's For You Chat question. What is the worst accident you've ever seen or experienced in person? I suppose we could also say disaster here as well.
Right. Okay, so basically I was actually in the 91 earthquake, but luckily I was in Taipei. So yeah, it wasn't that serious compared to
Other places.
I know. So 921大地震.
I guess for me, I was in Kaohsiung when Typhoon Morakot hit.
Wow.
So that was the biggest typhoon I've ever seen, and of course we all know the damage that it caused.
okay.
Right, yeah. So anyways, this question can be answered by you guys.
Right.
You guys experienced some earthquakes, some typhoons in
Right.
Taiwan quite a bit, so you might have a good answer to this question. But we are all out of time, so we'll see you again tomorrow.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
The Chernobyl disaster, then and now. Disaster struck the Chernobyl nuclear power plant in Ukraine, USSR, shortly after midnight on April 26, 1986. During a safety test, there was a power surge. Workers reacted by trying to shut the plant down, but another surge caused several explosions and a fire. Worst of all, large amounts of radioactive material were released into the air. Later, the disaster was blamed on poor plant design and a lack of proper safety training. No one was told how serious things were at first. People living in nearby Pripyat went about their business as normal until a few fell violently ill. What's worse, officials were slow to get people out of the danger zone. For instance, it wasn't until 2 p.m. the following day that buses started taking people away. The lasting effects of Chernobyl were terrible. 28 people died of radiation poisoning within a few weeks. Many more in Ukraine and nearby countries developed cancer as the radiation spread. Much of Europe was affected. It's still impossible to estimate how many people might die as a result of Chernobyl. Some put the figure at around 4,000. Others fear the true number will be much higher.
Vocabulary Review.
React. George wasn't sure how his mother would react when he told her that he failed the test. Explosion. The explosion in the factory damaged the machines so badly that they had to shut it down for a month. Release. When factories release harmful gases into the air, it often causes the people who live nearby to get sick. Blame. Tracy blamed bad traffic for her lateness, but she really just slept through her alarm. Poisoning. Harvey had to go to the hospital when he got food poisoning at the restaurant last night. Estimate. The UN estimates that the global population will grow to 8.5 billion by 2030.
以上节目是由活用空中美语制作，活用空中美语杂志，请洽询全国各大书店。如欲索取试听教材，请来电02-2364-4000 02-2364-4000，或上网查询，网址是 www.english4u.net www.english4u.net